Good evening. I'm Bernard Schwartz. I'm the director of the 92nd Streetwise Unterberg Poetry Center, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's event in celebration of Debbie Millman's new collection of interviews, Why Design Matters. Ms. Millman will be joined in conversation first by Roxane Gay, and then by Saeed Jones and Chanel Miller. Thank you for joining us here in the hall and virtually wherever you happen to be. Before we begin, a quick reminder of other upcoming events. Louise Erdrich will do a virtual reading from her new novel, Sentences, on November 11th, and that will be followed by poet Rita Dove's in-person appearance on November 15th. Come December, we'll present in-person and virtual events with Gary Steingart and Jonathan Franzen, as well as a literary performance of Lucille Clifton's memoir, Generations, by the actor Issa Davis. Please check out our website, 92y.org readings for dates and ticketing information on the entire fall lineup. As part of tonight's event, which will feature first the one-on-one conversation and then the group conversation, we'll be taking audience questions on note cards. If you have a question, get a note card from one of the ushers, write it down, and pass it back. Afterward, books will be available for purchase in the lobby, courtesy of Postman Books. Some of them are even pre-signed. Please note that while the publication of hard copies of Why Design Matters has been delayed a few months, Postman is taking pre-orders, and we encourage you to support independent booksellers. And now please welcome Debbie Millman and Roxane Gay.
Wow, hello.
Oh, thank you all for coming out. Thank you, thank you.
It's so great to be here in person.
I know.
Again.
I don't even remember what this felt like.
Me
I'm so
neither. The last
nervous.
event I did was in March 19th, 2020. Yeah, it's been a while.
Yes.
Well, I mean, the last in-person event.
But thank you for coming out. Thank you so much.
Yes. Oh, also, thank you for believing in science and getting vaccinated.
And everybody that's online as well, including Mr. and Mrs. Gay who are watching.
My mom and dad, they were going to come, but they landed late. So I'm not.
She's not tweeting.
Thank you. I have questions that I even wrote down. So Debbie, sorry.
She's the only one that's supposed to be
I call her
calling
Deborah.
Debbie is the
Debbie is the hyphenation. We're here in celebration of your 7th book, Why Design Matters. Tell us, why does design matter?
She has such a different voice when she's doing her interviews. This is not her at-home voice.
No, it's certainly not.
So, Deborah, tell us why design matters. It matters because everything is designed. Everything is designed. Everything is intended. When we are living, we have intention in the things that we wear and the things that we eat and the way that we live. And so because of that, I think that everything that we do ultimately does matter.
Oh, I have never thought about it that way, but you're right. Everything is designed.
Everything.
Whether it's designed well or not.
I mean, even the things that are supposedly not designed, the things that are supposed to be anti-design, are designed being anti-design. Mm-hmm. I remember once my dad decided, when he was alive, he decided at some point towards the end of his life that he no longer wanted to support Lacoste or Ralph Lauren by wearing their branded polo shirts.
What a stand.
Fair enough.
No, I'm kidding. Go on.
No, but this is, he actually, I wish that you could have met him for just this reason alone. He decided rather than cut a hole in them, which he was considering.
Oh my God, I love this.
Or replace them all. Mm-hmm. I get my frugality from him. Mm-hmm. He decided to put an American flag over the logo. Or over the I'm like, Dad, that's also a logo. Yeah.
See, fathers, what can you do? Now, what these audience members may not know is that Design Matters is not only the title of your book, it's the title of your long-running podcast, in fact, 16 years. You are, right? It is, wow. You are an early adopter. In fact, Thank you. I take credit for all of it. No, you've been podcasting since before it was even called podcasting, especially back when it was an Uber Boys Club.
Yes.
So how did you even get into podcasting?
It was quite by accident. It was not intentional. I am not in any way responsible for what happened because I was cold called by a fledgling internet radio network called Voice America. They called me and I thought they were offering me a job. I thought they were offering me, like I was envisioning myself this like hip DJ that talked about music and design and was playing records in the background, even though I never have DJed professionally. I was envisioning this. They were offering me not a job, but an opportunity to pay them to produce a radio show. So it was 100% a vanity project. This was in 2004. That whole previous decade, I had been working 24/7 building a business in branding. And when I started at Sterling Brands, which is where I was doing this in 1995, it was really the first time I had ever been successful at anything, ever. And I was already well into my 30s en route to 40. And I felt at that time, when I first started to feel successful, it was intoxicating. It's all I wanted to do was feel more of it. So I essentially gave up doing anything that was purely creative and dedicated myself 24/7 to building this business that was giving me so much ego enhancement. But, you know, decade or so into doing it, I thought maybe I had killed off my creative spirit. And I mean, I had stopped everything. I stopped needlepoint. I put my guitar under the bed. I was no longer drawing. I was no longer writing bad poetry, which that actually might have been a good thing. But, but when I got this cold call from Voice America, I thought this could sort of be a Trojan horse creative project. I can do this under the auspices of talking about branding and business, but I could really try to do this as a completely non-commercial design project, design initiative. And so that's what I did. I started this thing. I started paying them to produce this podcast. Working with them really felt like what it would be like to work with Wayne and Garth from Wayne's World. I swear they were doing bong hits in Arizona where the podcast was being produced. I was doing them on a handheld telephone set, and my guests would sit, there was a little desk in the Empire State Building where Sterling Brands was located, so I could legitimately say broadcasting live from the Empire State Building.
Wow. Ye old times.
That was kind of amazing.
Yeah.
The reason why so many radio stations would say that back then was because they had their antennas at the top of the Empire State Building, but they weren't located in the actual building. Mm-hmm. I was. And so my guest would sit, like literally I interviewed Malcolm Gladwell. He was holding a handset, I was holding a handset. And I don't know if anybody is old enough to remember back in the day when, you know, grandma called and everybody ran to the different extensions in the house and how you'd all overlap and have the echoes. That's what all the early shows were like. They were terrible. And I did that for 4 years. I did 100 episodes that way because I ended up loving doing it. And it really was this creative project that ended up being the gift of a lifetime. But it was so much fun to do.
I can tell that it's so much fun just in watching you prepare for the episodes. And one of the things that always strikes me is that the show began, for those who don't know, as a conversation with designers. And then over the years, it has evolved really to conversations with creative people in all kinds of fields. So what has kept you making the show for so long? Because I don't know that I've done anything but writing for 17 years.
Well, I'm considerably a bit older than you. I tend to do things for long periods of time. I'm just like that.
Oh, good for me.
Good for both of us. Mm-hmm. And As I said, it took me quite a long time to reach any kind of sense of being successful at anything. And so I've been endlessly fascinated by how people construct their lives, how they make what they make, how artists create something from nothing, how they find that courage to believe in themselves enough to want to make something for the world. And I never ever get tired of probing those questions. How did you become you? Mm-hmm. And I love what I hear, because everybody has a different story and everybody has different answers, and everybody that I speak to is making something really unique and really beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Debbie Millman, how did you become you?
30 years of therapy. Thanks, Dr. Kiersky.
That's a long time.
It is a long time. I told you, I do.
For 30 years.
30,
wow.
I'm like a bad Woody Allen character from one of his bad movies.
Well, thank God this is real life. We know how that ends. You know, when we think about these kinds of conversations and sustaining them for this long, you have to be able to conduct a good interview. So what makes a good interview?
Genuine curiosity for who you're talking with, a respect for who they are and what they do and how they have become who they've become, patience, because you need to really establish a certain level of trust during the course of an interview before you can really get to that, what I consider to be a click with someone, where you feel that mutuality, that you know that they know, that you know that they know that this is safe. Mm-hmm. I think a sense that you're trying to show or share with your listeners sort of the unfurling of that person's life and what it was like for them to become who they are. So that sense of being seen. Mm-hmm.
What happens when you don't have that click? Because as someone who has also interviewed a few people,
You mean like Michelle Obama and Madonna?
I mean, I don't want to name names, but
I'll do it for you.
Yes. You know, if you don't find that moment, that chemistry, that common ground, it can be extraordinarily awkward and interminable. So what happens when you don't find that click? How do you keep pushing forward to getting to hopefully a place that's productive for the audience?
The only time that I didn't feel that click was when I was told that I was asking stupid questions.
A man.
Yeah. It turned out okay in the end, but I genuinely I always feel it. I don't really stop the interview until I feel it. Mm-hmm. So, although I haven't, ever been on like 4-week interviews, so
right.
Eventually it does happen.
So when you were told you're asking stupid questions, I know that it had a good ending. So what happened? Because I think that's a good story.
Well, and I don't think he would mind my sort of outing him. It was Richard Saul-Wurman, and I was told that he was a bit persnickety and to really make sure I knew my stuff before the interview. I was really interested in talking to him. I'd been interested in talking to him for years. We had several phone conversations prior to the interview, so he really understood that I'm looking to investigate and reveal the arc of a life, not just talking about somebody's latest book or piece of music or performance. And he came into the studio, and I was really surprised when I was doing my research to find that he had at one point really been quite down on his luck and had a really difficult time. And that, to me, to come from that moment where you really are so down on your luck that you're not even sure where you're living, to then create the TED conference, one of the most successful conferences of all time, so highly respected, it's so brilliant, mm-hmm. that I didn't think he would have issues with talking about that moment of being down on his luck. And he did. He's like, I don't want to talk about the past, I only want to talk about the future. And I'm like, that's sort of not the way I do the show, but I tried to be respectful. Mm-hmm. And then I continued probing and moved away from that to something else that still wasn't fully current. And that's what he said, you're asking such stupid questions. And I said, well, then what kind of questions would you like me to ask? And he said, well, that's a good question. And then at one point, I just sort of gave up. I just gave up because I wasn't feeling it, and I knew that there was nothing I could do to feel it. And I said, and I very abruptly closed the show. I said, okay, well, thank you for being here. And he was startled because it really was a terrible interview, and I was just giving up and ending it. And he was like, can I have a do-over? And I said, well, if we do it by my rules, yes. And he's like, okay, but he didn't really want to do it by my rules. But I published it anyway, and I got more response from that particular interview than I have probably from every interview combined, because people were somewhat appalled at the way he spoke to me, but they were also like, girl, you were good. And I was like, I tried. And then he wrote me and he said, I didn't think it was very good at the time, but ultimately I think it was a good interview.
Oh, well, thank you.
And now we're friends. And now we're friends.
See, I mean, happy ending.
Yeah. I didn't include him in the book, though.
See, that'll teach you. Word to the wise. You know, when I got into podcasting, I truly had no idea what it takes to make a podcast. I just thought, oh, you just sit around, record some shit on your phone, upload it, it's fine. And it's incredibly time-consuming, and producers work incredibly hard and don't get a lot of recognition. And there's a lot of preparation that goes into a podcast. And so I would love for you to walk us through, how do you prepare for an episode and to really talk to someone about the arc of their life?
Well, it takes a long time for me. I mean, she's very different. She just like gets things almost instantly. I'm very, very envious of how she approaches being able to just understand things instantly. I, on the other hand, not so much. It takes me a long time. And so I don't feel comfortable interviewing someone unless I really feel like I know everything about them. And so that means reading everything that they've written if I can. Depends on who I'm talking to. If it's an author, I try to read everything that they've written. If it's a performer, I try to see as much as I can of what they've been in. I just interviewed Nick Offerman. That was fun. We had to watch Parks and Recreation. We had to watch Devs. We had to watch Colin in Black and White. I mean, there were so many different things that I ended up having, a couple episodes of Will and Grace because he's married to Megan Mullally. And then I try to also read and or listen to every interview they've ever been a part of. And so that is really what takes the longest amount of time. So if they've been on a lot of podcasts, and they've been on podcasts with people that I really respect, Tim Ferriss, Dax Shepard, Krista Tippett, Terry Gross, then I'll have all of those interviews transcribed. It's a lot easier for me to have them transcribed than to actually listen to them, because it takes a lot longer to listen and stop and transcribe and listen and stop and transcribe. Whereas if I just read them, I can highlight what I need and then be able to funnel those into my transcripts. And so that takes quite a lot of time. And then, so I feel comfortable when I've amassed about 70 pages of research. And so that could be book notes that if I'm interviewing an author, I'll buy all their books to get them to sign them, but I'll also get Kindle copies so that I can highlight and then also, again, easily transcribe. I amass all of that into one master document. And then, because I am a designer, I'll duplicate that document and then start highlighting and editing. So I usually have about 5 versions of that original document. I rename them original research, edited research, final research, draft interview, final interview. And so it's 5 iterations. Yeah, you don't even know this.
I did not know this. This is excessive. In the best possible way, having been on your podcast.
And so what I do by the 3rd draft is then put everything in order chronologically. And then what's the hardest part is actually deciding what to take out. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes you're really excited about some little tidbit that you found that you know would be a great question, but it doesn't really help forward their story. It's just fun. Sometimes I'll start with those as icebreakers, but there are things you kind of have to leave on the cutting room floor, and those kill me, but I also know that in the grand scheme of things, it makes for a better interview. I don't want to go so far off track that it sort of loses a thread of continuity. But ultimately, I think that a great interview is like a game of pool, like a game of billiards. You want to shoot, with billiards, you're not playing tennis. It's not a volley. You want to keep shooting for as long as you can. And so what I try to do is shoot the balls go in any different direction, but know enough to be able to follow wherever those balls go to be able to keep getting them into the pockets. And it's taken a long time to be able to feel confident that I could do that, but after close to 500 interviews, I think I'm getting the hang of it.
I think so. So now you've done almost 500 interviews. What lies ahead for Design Matters?
Hope that people keep listening and that I have an audience to keep doing it, because as I said, I don't know that I'll ever feel sated with this curiosity about how amazingly creative people become who they are, and how they get up every morning to do this thing that they love doing and have allowed themselves to do.
Have you learned something about creativity over these 500 conversations?
I think so. I think that creative people tend to be also very curious. They have this deep-seated need to keep making things. They seem to be very insecure about their ability to keep making things and don't want to rest on their laurels and don't want to think that their greatest work is behind them. One of my favorite things that's ever been said to me was by David Lee Roth, the former frontman of Van Halen. And when I asked him what it felt like back when Van Halen was in their sort of epic moment in 1984, what it felt like to be the biggest band on the planet with the biggest tour and the biggest video and the biggest hits, what did it feel like to be at the very, very top of the tallest mountain imaginable? And he said, you have to be careful when you get to those moments in your life, because when you get to the top of the tallest mountain, it's always cold, you're often alone, there's only one direction to go.
Oh. Yeah.
And so I thought that, for those of us like me that hope to be playing the long game and have taken a long time to sort of become who we are, that there's hope, that maybe we won't peak till we die.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, peaking can be not that great. Wow, now I'm going to really think about David Lee Roth and the cold loneliness of a mountain. Well, today we're actually joined by two really lovely people that you've had on your show, Saeed Jones and Chanel Miller. And so they're going to join us, and we're going to talk with them as well.
Yay, thank you. Take it down.
Hi.
Yay, hi, Saeed.
Thank you.
Yay,
We were having so much fun in the group. We were like, oh shit, we actually have to go.
We completely forgot.
Hi.
Oh, I mean, as one does. Saeed.
Hi.
I'm wearing our shoes
I
today.
know. These
I
are
wore them for you.
lovely too, as well. They're so beautiful.
I mean, look at
what's
them.
What's with the
We
shoes?
both have this pair of shoes, and we love them.
They're very
the
comfortable.
most comfortable shoes in the world.
My credit score goes up every time I put them on.
I mean, absolutely sky high. Thank you guys for joining us on the Design Matters stage. And Saeed, I know you're working on a new collection of poetry. You're actually in the process of assembling it. What can you tell us about your next book?
It is titled Alive at the End of the World. I've been working, there are some poems that were written in like 2015, 2016, but I think I did what we're all doing, which is try to make sense of how to live and try to process my work as an artist in real time. And I think we all are really grappling with the sense of betrayal. I feel betrayed, pick a reason. Today could be the Democrats and you're just yeah, I know.
Listen, the way they have thrown women under the fucking bus and children,
Yes.
I mean, Okay, go on.
That's what I mean. That
Told you
moment
it
when you
was
go,
gonna be salty.
listen, because I feel betrayed by time. What day is it? Where are we? And that to me is the sense of the apocalypse. It's not actually this big dramatic one size fits all, it's not the meteorite. It's this constant sense of disruption and then other people not responding to it, and then you have to keep living as a Black queer person. So that's what I'm working on.
How do you create while shouldering that sense of betrayal and that sense of trying to figure out how to live in the world?
I pay attention to women. I pay attention to other people I respect, because y'all are out here doing the work, and I'm like, well, I guess I need to keep trying. That's how I feel. Technically, I just tried to build the dynamic into the writing. So there's a lot of repetition in the book. Because you're like, wasn't there a mass shooting this morning? Oh, this afternoon, didn't that just, what do you mean? There's January 6th, did that happen? I thought we all, Condi, what? And so there's a lot of poems with the same titles. I wanted to basically make poetry like of the glitch. That feeling where you go, did he do that? And you kind of look over your shoulder. I tried to build that into the writing because that's what it feels like, where you're like, is this 1921? Are we in Tulsa? Or are we on Capitol Hill on January 6, 2020, that. And so poetry, the lyric, the metaphor, and certainly being able to play with lines and enjambment. That's what I've been trying to do.
No, slacker. No, but I love hearing that. And Chanel, I know that you published a memoir, Know My Name, and in many ways it was a reclamation of your narrative because you didn't have a name. Everyone called you Emily Doe. And then you had this act of reclamation. Did you accomplish what you set out to do in writing that book?
Yeah, but I think I knew that when I finished it. And when I was getting ready to come forward, I was mostly just thinking about safety, like not even literary celebration. It was more just about putting up barricades when I was re-entering the world and making sure they were fortified enough. So I think one wonderful thing in the last 2 years is that those barricades have been dissolving, and I've been able to trust people again. Like what you were talking about earlier about genuine questioning. I didn't know that existed for me before when I talk about this topic. And so when I started to learn that there are people out there who ask with a genuine interest in knowing me and don't have other agendas, then I begin to answer more openly. But yeah, the book's really good. But I also knew.
Yes, it is.
Thank you for
Knew
saying
that.
Yes, it is.
Beautiful book.
It is a beautiful book. It's
Factual
really
statement.
lovely written, like lovely writing, and you never know when someone writes a book if it's going to be good. And this one was excellent, and I'm glad you can like claim that space and know like I did the damn thing.
Yeah, because the first draft was like super sloppy, but then I watched the structure like get into place, and then I watched the pacing pick up, and then my character just really kind of figures it out and emerges pretty whole. And even though in my day-to-day life, I really don't know still a lot of things, at the end of the book, I'm like, doesn't it feel it feels good, like very solid on 2 feet. So I think that's where I wanted it to end.
And how does it feel now that so many people do know your name? Has it changed the way you move through the world?
Not really, because so many interactions are still one by one, and that's the only way I can feel things is one by one. And even when I received like thousands of letters, I can only read them word by word and really take it in that way. I run into people, and came out of a store the other day, and a girl was like, Chanel, and she had a tattoo of one of my drawings, and that was really amazing. Sometimes people will just come up to me and say thank you and walk away. But it's been pretty surreal I like when people cry. I think people get self-conscious and often apologize when they do, but I really don't mind it. That's when I know I've done my job too, because something just like bubbled to the top and like came out, and I feel like I played a part in releasing it. So that's really special.
Yeah, that is a lovely moment. At first, it used to freak me out because I just thought, oh my God, don't cry.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you want to fix it. But then you realize, no, something I've done has allowed someone to trust me with that vulnerability, which I find to be incredibly powerful and incredibly moving.
Yeah, when they cry, I'm like, it's happening.
Saeed, on Twitter, you share exuberance for a lot of the culture that you consume and that you enjoy. It's one of my favorite things about you, in addition to just your brilliant writing. And one of the things I love is that it's so genuine. Like, you're genuinely taking pleasure in this. And then, of course, everyone's got something to say about it. And that can be like super weird, because sometimes it's just like, man, I'm just watching TV. How do you maintain that level of joy and exuberance despite sort of all of the feedback?
I mean, you know, I think there's something to be said for, it's one thing, your kind of public self or the textual self is more refined, and then privately you're like, I don't know. You know, I'm in my group text, you know, I text you, I go, what the hell is going on? You know, it's what I say all the time. You know, Saeed in Arabic means happy and fortunate. And so, you know, it was my mother and I would talk about that a lot, the meaning of that. And so happiness and joy is a part, it's literally who I am. That's something on my mind a lot. And so I think it's like the way you talked about design, that everything is design, and the way you honor that, it's a practice. Love is a practice, design is a practice. I think joy is too. I think expressing it, especially when it's so hard. There is just a lot going on, you know, and you know, if you've read my work, you know, hi Miwa, is that you? Hi, oh girl, I saw you through the mask, bitch. That's how you know we're friends, girl. I was like, that fabric ain't gonna get between me and my Miwa, hi. But you know, if you read my work, it's not fun. It's rarely comforting. I keep trying to write a funny book and it doesn't happen. So I think when I see something that brings me joy, a TV show or some shoes or my dog being silly, you know, I owe it to myself. And I think I owe it to people who, for whatever reason, keep paying attention to my tweets to share that with you, because I'm trying to remind myself that we are at the end of the world, but we're alive. And I think we can all do that for each other.
Yeah, and I think that when you embody joy as a practice, I think it gives other people permission to feel joy, especially given everything going on in the world. Sometimes I think, you know, I certainly feel like, oh, why am I happy in this moment?
Right.
Given that there is so much suffering, how dare I? And then at the same time, I wonder, well, surely I'm allowed this moment. And I think when you give permission in that way, it's really gratifying. Chanel, I know that you have a podcast with your sister about childhood, and it's very joyful. And so I would love for you to tell us a little bit about the podcast, Childhood.
Yeah, so during the pandemic, my sister and I were speaking on the phone every day, and we thought, why don't we let other people in on these convos? And we were visiting childhood a lot, because it's interesting to live a life under the same roof and come away with two perspectives. And there were so many random, I mean, even when we were in elementary school, in my closet, we had a radio show, and we would close the door, and it was completely dark. Like, we didn't even have a light. And the name of our show, which I thought was brilliant at the time and is still brilliant now, was like the letters, "Are you okay?" And it's so smart. And we had a little...
She owns that. No one steal it.
First, trademark.
Copyright. We had a tape recorder, and we put it on the stool, and we would interview each other and like change our voices, and we would sing songs from Space Jam, which is like da 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 da, and then go to the traffic report. It was just like two.
as one does.
Are you okay? No, girl, it's raining.
So we were always just inventing things. Our parents pretty much let us do whatever we wanted. We were allowed to take any ingredients and just bake them, and that was called thingy. And we would hold little taste testing sessions. And we would revisit a lot of things. Like, wasn't that a little bit odd? Like, I visited a friend who had a horse. Like, they're horse girls, obviously. And I was like, well, I need one. So Tiffany was my horse. And I made her crawl around on all fours. And we had these chairs with these wooden backs like this. I was like, oh, this is perfect. So we put our dog leashes on the chair like reins. And I would like take it off, be like, come here. And like clip my dog leash to my sister. And I used the bath mat as her saddle.
Oh my
and I would sit on her. And I fed her Cheerios. Like I did the whole thing, combed her hair.
Which have oats.
Oats, yeah. Oats would have been more nutritious. But I remember my mom looked me in the eye, was like, you can no longer sit on Tiffany. Like, you are too heavy, because she's younger. So I was like, fine. But there's so many things like that. It's like you never really think about it, and suddenly stuff starts to come up. So.
Wow.
What came up for you?
Well, no, it's funny. My mom was mentioning this to me the other day. She told me I used to pay my brother a nickel to iron my clothes.
Yes.
I don't have any recollection of this at all. And I also used to make him play school.
Yes.
Yeah.
He was my student, and I was like 6 and he was 3. Not sure what was going on there, but I got a chalkboard for Christmas that year, because I've always been the same person. And so I made him sit in my little school, and so it's funny you should say that, because like when I started thinking about this thing, it's like I just don't remember any of this, but man, we were funny kids.
And there was remnants of who you were. You're like,
absolutely,
you glimpse that. It's kind of cool.
It is interesting to see the ways that people do evolve, but sometimes there are parts of us that don't change. And this question is for everyone. All of us are multi-hyphenates who do lots of different creative things. And so how do you balance those creative interests between art making and book writing and even different genres, film and television, those kinds of things? Debbie, let's start with you.
Ooh. And then I have a question for everybody too. I've been waiting for a little moment to sneak in.
Excellent.
I've always been somebody that liked to do a lot of different things. Even I think back to high school, the remnants, and I was in the chorus and on the school newspaper, and I was on all the plays and in mathletes, and I know.
Sorry. Okay.
And I just loved being involved in a lot of different things at the same time. And somehow the sort of combinatorial creativity of it all helped fuel who I was. And I've never stopped being that way, whether it be in high school, in college, or now sort of real life. I've always wanted to have a life that had overlapping aspects to it.
What about you, Chanel?
I think, my parents are here, and my dad is a retired therapist, my mom's a writer, so there's like a lot of feeling in our family, and everybody has feelings, but I always just was very open about them. Like, it never occurred to me to tuck certain ones away, which was really nice, and I think a lot of my work is about how to describe certain feelings, and I like that challenge, because instead of just like having it all icky in you, you get to think about, okay, but how would I capture this and articulate it and name it, and then it just becomes a challenge. And sometimes it works better in a drawing, in a visual representation. Sometimes it's nice to come up with a moment, even like frustration. Like, how would you describe, if a little alien floated down right now, how would you describe frustration? And I remember a feeling of the first time I went skiing when I was really little, I was in my snowsuit, and I also had those sheen mittens, metallic, and I had a wedgie. And the feeling of rubbing my puffy little butt with my slippery mitten and all the and nothing, no grasp, I remember tearing up. And I was like, there's no way out of this. I'm just stuck in this feeling. What is this? And that's frustration, and now you know.
Wow, our alien overlords are gonna definitely come to you first.
Do you see why we got distracted back then? We were fully, Chanel and I were fully vibing. And we were like, oh, where are we?
He ran out the door. I was like, where
we gotta go. Yeah, crazy. First of all, I'm a Sagittarius, which is, mood, what, know us, our time is coming. I've always wanted to do all kinds of things. I've always, I did speech and debate in high school and then in college, and I remember I would get really good at one thing, and then your coaches and mentors would say keep doing that, and then that would be precisely the moment I would want to do something else, and then by the time I was in college, I was just doing everything, and I loved that. I would debate, and then I would do interpretation, and then I would write a speech, and then I'd do improv. I just wanted all of it. I think now. I think I'm learning to flow and to embrace the tension, instead of sitting in the frustration and going, for example, I'm working on edits for this poetry collection, and it's, like I said, that's quite a world, that's quite a space to kind of be in, and then, I check Twitter, and I'm like, what's going on? Because, cis people, are you okay? I don't think you are. And so I was in the tension of working on poems and whatever, and I looked up and Dave Chappelle's special, The Closer came, and I was like, what is going on? Just a sincere, huh? And the dissonance between the dreaminess of the work I was doing and then knowing as a queer person, queer people are under siege. Black trans women are getting murdered more than ever before. Not less. That dissonance, I was like, well, it's time to write an essay. The lyric isn't going to work. So I think instead of feeling hemmed in, and I think the interview with that interchangeable shitty white man you talked to, I can't remember. I'm sure he's a big deal. Fed?
All good.
I'll never get invited again. Instead of sitting in the frustration of the role he was trying to hem you into, you said, oh, you want to play, you feeling froggy, let's jump. And then you respond, and something was created. So I think that's kind of what happens. When I feel hemmed in, I go, why? And is there another medium or mode that will allow me? So I'm just kind of, trying to vibe,
Okay, so I have a question. Yeah. I was sitting here listening, feeling all of a sudden the common denominator that the three of you share is your memoirs. And how I've come to know you through your work and through your memoirs. Especially, that's how I first fell in love with you. And
Totally worked.
Pardon?
I said it totally worked.
You did it, girl.
Thank you.
You did it, girl.
So you've all sort of engaged with your spirits in a way that allowed you to understand something about yourself in a way that allows others to understand you too, which is a pretty remarkable thing. How do you know what to include?
You might have noticed my memoir is pretty slim. And the reason for that is I come to it as a poet. I was a poet writing a memoir. There's no flack in a poem. Everything there has a purpose, it should. True pure, brutal economy of language. That's what I love about poetry. And so with the memoir, I was like, okay, like it will only be there if it's relevant. 9/11 happens in the middle of my book, and it's not even referenced. There's not even, you know what I mean? Like, it's not even like, oh, and then on the TV. No, because that was not going to add insight to what I was trying to help people understand about the crucible, you know, that I grew up in. So that was always the question. Like, and there was a lot of material where I went, oh, this is really interesting. And I thought that way, or my editor felt that way, but one of us eventually would go, but what's it serve? And so, you know, it would be cut out.
I think every human has a story, but there's
Many.
But there's got to be something in the story that will touch others and allow them to understand something about themselves. I think that that's what people want to be able to connect with, especially in a memoir. How does this help me understand who I am? How does this reveal something about sort of the human experience? And so that's sort of where the source of my question is coming from. How do you know what it is that will connect with others?
Well, I don't think that you do. You hope, but for me, writing a memoir was a very internal process. I had always said I was never going to write one. And
why?
Oh, so many reasons. I don't trust my memory sometimes. And I also just thought, who would be interested in what I have to say about my life? I'm just a girl from Omaha. And so as I started to write, I needed a focus because people oftentimes mistake memoir for autobiography, but memoir is about memory and it's about a singular aspect, for me anyway. And so I knew when I sold the book that I was going to write a book about fatness because I had not yet seen a memoir in the world that had talked about the experience of fatness outside of the context of weight loss or treating weight loss as a goal. And so, just like you, Saeed, if it didn't relate to my body, like the subtitle of my book is a memoir of my body. And so if it didn't relate to my body, I didn't include it. And so there's entire swaths of my romantic history that were simply not relevant because they didn't have a connection to my body in the ways that the pieces I did include did. And then when the book came out, it was one of the biggest surprises of my life that so many people connected to it from all walks of life in all kinds of bodies. Like I never imagined. And a lot of really thin women came up to me and were like, oh my God, I just see myself in you. And I just was like, where? But I mean, it's just like, girl, I don't see myself in you. But it was really gratifying to know that we do have this commonality. We all live in a body, and especially when you're in a woman's body, and I would say any woman's body, you know that your body is always going to be the subject of scrutiny and that you're not going to have any bodily autonomy in Texas or Mississippi or Louisiana. And many other states, and that it's a constant negotiation of the autonomy you want and the autonomy that you're allowed. And so I think that's what people were able to connect to. And because I did my job on the page, that space was there for them to engage with the work.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And Janelle, I'd love for you to answer this question also, because one of the things that struck me, I mean, there were so many things that struck me in your book. The fact that you had the audacity and the courage to claim your story. And at such a young age to be so multi-talented and so crystal clear about your message. How did you get to that? How did you find that in yourself?
Well, I think talking about the origin point of the writing, I remember before the book deal or anything, right after the sentencing, like everyone knew that was a bad moment. There was a lot of anger and unfairness. But for me, I remember coming home, and it wasn't, like once the anger subsided, I remember just sitting, like leaning on my kitchen counter, having made it through every step I was supposed to have taken and like completed the process and being like, what do I tell someone? when they come to me? What am I supposed to say? Like, I was so sad by everything I had seen. And it really freaked me out having all this information, knowing that if a friend or survivor ever came to me, I'd have to tell them, like, there's nothing, like, I did it and it wasn't good. And so I felt like I had to write to share what I'd seen. And then I also think, in a strange way, a lot of the memories were quite lonely. And I think about my advocate at the time for the YWCA. She would come, every time I testified, she was allowed to sit a few feet away from me, also facing out toward the audience, but was never allowed to speak to me. But she was this presence. And then when I left, would get excused to go to the bathroom because I was crying, she would accompany me. So she was like this little ghost, but her presence was so vital, even though we weren't allowed to communicate, even though she couldn't technically do anything except be there. And I thought, in writing, I'm creating like a little ghost for somebody, just this accompaniment, this presence for them to experience things. Like, I will go with you to these places and we'll look at them together. And I think it's beautiful that I could finally take the reader where I wanted to go. Like, everyone else in that courtroom, when I walk out to go to the bathroom, they just think, oh, she's gonna go blow her nose. But I take you with me to the bathroom, and we're there together, and you smell the earthiness of the paper towel when it's underwater. You feel the like texture of your under eye when you've rubbed it too hard, and you're there with me. And so selfishly, I have, once you read the book, you have that memory with me now. And that's really nice for me. And I think for survivors who aren't ready to vocalize their stories, I'm now present in their story in some way, even if I haven't heard the details of their narrative.
Yeah, wow.
Do you want to ask that trauma question? No. Can I ask it?
Yes.
You've all written about trauma in very deep, revealing, heartbreaking ways. Yet, you are able to evoke a sense of hope and optimism in ways that few can. Your books all, in many ways, center around a trauma. And yet you come out of that trauma ready to embrace your readers. How do you create that state of mind?
Well, the thing about writing about trauma is, at least for me, especially the older I get, the more I want people to understand that you are not only your trauma, and that there is room, when you're very lucky, or when you work very hard in therapy, or any other number of things, to find ways to hold both joy and trauma, to believe that you are more than your trauma. And even on the days when I don't believe it, I have to hold on to the hope that there is more than suffering in the world, and that you are not only the worst day or the worst days of your life. And I definitely wanted that to come across, because you want people to read your work and you don't want them to think, oh, Debbie Downer. Oh, see what you did there?
You've all seen the betrayal firsthand.
Diana
Correct the record, Debbie.
So, but you don't want anyone to just think, oh my God, more of the just sadness. And so I just wanted to create space for people to recognize this thing happened and it was really quite terrible, but it's not all that I am. It's not all that you should know about me. And there is a lot of beauty and joy in my life as well.
Oh gosh. I really try to answer your question. Also, just as an aside, I want to say, we were talking about this back there. Debbie, you are the most prepared person who's ever researched.
True.
It was incredible. We were talking about this. It's incredible. There's one other person who comes close, and that's Terry Gross. And it was, I was stunned at like the level of detail, and you surpassed that. I remember being like, Debbie's read interviews I don't even think are public yet. Like Debbie is the FBI agent in my computer that I'm always worried is like, look, no, but and that's just so important because I think as you're honoring, the way we tell our stories, you honor other people by your attention to detail, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
When your earlier question, when I was like, I pay attention to women, I've watched Roxanne have a tough day, a really tough day, either in person or online, and then I've watched her show up and say things that I know will set other people free. I've been on book tour and then a copy of Chanel's book showed up. I don't even know who sent it to, but it showed up in my hotel room when I was in Chicago. And I was like, my goodness, like how can I be out here complaining? How can I just you're allowed to feel what you feel, but how can I be out here indulging the self-pity when not only did she make it through it and got to it and it was like you said, like that nothing, but made something. You made something. You turned poison into medicine. And so I just, I saw my mom like on the hospital bed in the emergency room, like and she just, I must win, That's the woman who made me. So, I always want to honor what happened, accuracy, the truth, getting there. That has to be there. I'm not going to try to spare you, I won't. But the intention of understanding that you get to the other side, no way forward but through, that is why I'm writing it. And I think, that's the difference. That's like you can traumatize yourself. I don't think, if you don't have a clear sense of intention, a book, it's kind of like you build a labyrinth for yourself and then you can get lost in it.
Oh, yes.
And so I think the intention of saying like, I've this hard-earned jewel, I'm determined to get to the other side and hand it to someone who needs it, is kind of the only reason that gets you through, because it's very easy to have those detours. But I think that sense of purpose and appreciation, yeah.
Have you ever worried about being so revealing?
Not about myself, because I work with editors who I know will be like, okay, girl. Okay, girl. Like right now with my editor, we're going back and forth about this poem about Little Richard and like, should it end with the word comes? Comes. We're in dialogue. I don't know how it's gonna shake out. So I know when it's like my decisions and I'm on the line, like my editor, family members. If the reason I would not like to write another memoir is because family is involved when telling these stories. That was hard because, even just describing someone is intimate, my mother isn't here. So that was really hard. It helped that for the majority of the time I was writing the memoir, I was in a newsroom. I was at BuzzFeed News. And what happened in America was happening, which is to say truth, accuracy, fake news. I was like surrounded by this dialogue, and then I would go home and try to write my memoir with integrity. And so I think that was it, that I was just like, you need to be able to live with yourself. You need to be able to look people in the eye, And I can look family members in the eye and say like, what you did was wrong. But I think if you go too far, that's when you start looking away. That was my calibration.
Mm-hmm. We're looking at you now, Chanel.
I remember everything just felt so big and like you can't get out from under it, especially when you're younger. And every year is so important. Like I remember reading some memoirs where people would say, and then in my 20s, blah, blah, blah. I was like, whoa, their whole decade was one sentence.
Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Until you're 60.
And so I was like, I'm just still in that one little sentence, so I can't give up yet. And I remember I was preparing for to testify. It was one of my court dates, and I was really nervous about the media being there, and I was told, like, don't worry, it'll probably be around the time of the Super Bowl. And I was like, oh, it's like that easy to just, to not be, like you feel like something's so important. It's like, don't worry, people won't click on your article because people are busy throwing around the brown olive ball. And so that was sort of like a relief. Like you go from being like totally in the spotlight to being like, oh, no one like actually cares. You know what I mean? It's like kind of,
You're like,
kind of
Beyonce,
nice.
please give us a good halftime show. Please give the girls something to talk about. That's wild.
Yeah, it'll buy me some time to just keep surviving.
Wow.
And then in terms of joy, yeah, I've always been pretty joyful. And take someone like the defense attorney who I was very afraid of. I would think about him. In the book, I talk about visualizing him like throwing a softball underhand, just being like, what does he do on the weekends? Because he was such a daunting figure in that landscape, and he was such a joy stealer. And I started to think about like, who is this person qualified to steal my joy? Like, what makes him qualified to be taking so much of this like vitality that I naturally have? Like, who is he to have so much say in how I'm feeling and how I see myself? And I would just think of him, like he, in the evenings, probably goes to the grocery store and like will like look around at ice cream flavors and like finally settle on one. Like he's not some, crazy important person. And so I just started kind of shrinking people back to size. And that helped me kind of huddle my joy back, be like, come here, you're mine again, you know?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. You are such a generous person.
I know.
That is not what I thought that is not what I thought you were going to say about how you were picturing the defense. We'll talk later.
Okay.
We have some really great questions from the audience. Debbie, this is from Amy, your super fan. You are so generous with your gifts. Who or what inspires your generosity, and how can design be a practice of generosity?
Ooh, what a wonderful question. That's a big question. It makes me think about,
Oh, that's cute.
That's great.
through the cover. It makes me think about Milton Glaser, who kind of taught me about a worldview. Milton Glaser is the designer who made the I Heart New York logo and the Bob Dylan poster with his sort of wild hair. He passed away last year at 91. He was my teacher, my mentor, my friend. And I took a class with him in 2005. And in the class, he talked about how you can approach the world as a designer in one of two ways. You can approach the world as a place of scarcity, where you have to hold on to everything because there's not enough and you need to get yours. Or you can see the world as one of abundance and to try to share because there is enough for everyone if you share.
Yeah.
If everybody gives up some, there's always going to be enough for everyone.
Yeah.
And that has always stayed with me because I always, prior to that, had seen the world as a place of scarcity. Where if I don't hold on to, if I don't say yes to this, I'm never going to get another opportunity. If I don't get married to this person, I'm never going to get married again. Yay. Third time's the charm. If I don't keep this close, somebody else is going to take it from me.
Right.
And so I would collect things and keep them really tight and never share. And then all of a sudden, when I started doing the show in 2005, that very same year that I was studying with Milton Glaser, and really tried to embody that as a way to consider the world. That if I do try to share, maybe not only will there be enough for everyone, but I can sort of trust that it's not going to go away.
Right.
And I think that's just the way I've tried to be ever since.
Mm-hmm. I think looking at the world as a place of abundance, because it is, and it's just that the abundance is hoarded, is incredibly helpful. And I always try to remember that, even when I'm talking to people about the state of the world. It's like, we must not forget that this is a world of abundance, and three men basically have all of it.
And one other thing that Milton, because in this class that we took, somebody raised their hand and said something along the lines of, well, what if somebody takes something from me and tries to copy me? And he said, nobody's going to ever be able to do what you do exactly the way you do it. So that's not something to worry about. And that's also stayed with me because we all have our original voices. And the more we can share those, I think the less likely somebody is able to just copy it because it's yours.
Yeah. Debbie, this is also a question for you.
My goodness.
Y'all are so cute.
I didn't
I love
hear
it.
that.
He said, we're so cute. We are. I mean,
I love that everybody on this stage has so much confidence.
it's
It's so awesome.
It's also not true for me, but I can project confidence. This person asks, my dad once said to me, his life peaked at 45 when the trend lines of his wisdom and energy crossed. After speaking with or interviewing so many people, do you have a feeling about when that peak occurs?
When you let it. When you stop trying to go higher.
Well, say that again, because I was, as a man, I need to pay attention. It was the trend lines of energy.
Wisdom and energy. Like the older you get, the more wise you get. The older you get, the less energy you have. And so those lines crossed at that perfect apex at 45.
But no.
For her dad.
Yeah, but I think that
his.
you can muster the energy if you have the ideas. I mean, one hopes.
Yeah, I hope the peak never comes because I feel like when I compare the writing I did, I'm not ashamed of anything I've ever written, but the writing I'm doing today, however little it may be, is the best writing I've done. And I anticipate that continuing because I learn more, and I also think I develop a little more humility with each passing year because I also realize I know less. Emma asks Chanel, and I think this is a question Debbie and I had too. Your artwork and comics have brought me a lot of joy and often portray complex feelings and emotions in such a succinct way. Will you be doing more professionally with your art?
Yeah, for sure. I started doing these diary comics as a way to do something that's more immediate. Like a book is so cooked and every word is selected, and I needed something. I just also was really scared of feeling like I can only make really refined things now because there's so much I still want to learn about and try, but now I'm aware that I'm publicly trying it. And so I wanted to just continue to make these comics, and I use a very cheap, like $2 ballpoint pen and a small watercolor set, and I just say what feels true to me, and that's it.
Excellent.
And I love when you cross out and just keep it there.
Oh yeah, I also have a white out little roller. And then I take a picture of it, and then I saturate the image so you can't see the white out.
Saeed, do you remember the first time you honored yourself and your boundaries in spite of someone else's feelings or reactions? And can you share what that experience felt like?
I love these.
What a cool.
I mean, these audience questions are the best audience questions I've ever seen.
That was
So thank you.
That was beautiful. A beautiful question. Questions on art. Questions on art too. I mean, you know, I would have a different answer every 10 minutes if you asked me that, which is why it's such a good question. When the memory that came to mind immediately, and it was something that maybe could have been in the memoir. What's the movie? You know, I grew up, unfortunately, in a very Christian household with my grandmother, you know, summers in Memphis. And there was an Easter movie that would come on TNT. Anyway, at some point you see the dance of the seven veils. Do y'all know what, does anyone remember?
The Ten Commandments? Or Ben-Hur?
No, I think it might be King of Kings. Anyway,
I was thinking Easter parade.
there's a moment, you see homegirl do the dance of this, I mean, and she gives it. She gives it to you, okay? I was like, you have my head, I'm with it. And I was maybe in kindergarten, watching it with my grandmother and my aunt, who were both very conservative, older Black women. And we finished the movie, because it's just a scene in the movie. It's not what the movie's about. And then I went digging.
It's Oklahoma.
Is it?
That scene.
Oh, okay, mood, T. Then I went through my grandmother's closet and came back out to them as they were finishing up lunch or whatever, and I had some scarves. And I went up to my aunt, and I was like, can you tie, because she had them tied around her wrist. And it was just so beautiful. And I was like, and she was like, what's this for? And I was like, I want to do the dance of the seven veils. I want to do the dance. I need to do the dance. And my Aunt Carolyn said, and I guess it stands out in my mind because it was the first time learning as a boy that there were certain things I wasn't supposed to do. Mm-hmm. And she said, you're not supposed to do stuff like that. It's for, and I don't know if she said it's for girls, but it was very clear. And it was very funny because she said, but I'm gonna tie it anyway. And I was like, and I'm not doing it. And I remember the light in the room. I remember, just how it felt. I remember her smiling and then finish your dance, because it was our secret. And it just felt good. And I'm so proud of a little 6 or 7-year-old Saeed being okay, I'm gonna do it anyway. Mm-hmm. I think that's what it is, to recognize I didn't have the language, but I knew that there was something that I knew doing that was gonna allow me to feel, and I knew I deserved to feel it. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate that on some level she understood that too. So that's an early memory.
Yeah, shout out to your aunt.
Shout out to Carolyn, yeah.
She was 90% of the way there.
Right?
Right? We gotta meet our people where they are sometimes.
And let's talk about this. Here's the thing, I feel like a lot of these conversations, the Dave Chappelle, I'm no, queer people, women, trans folks, whoever, we're always willing to meet y'all halfway. In fact, that is a majority of how we spend our energy, trying to compassionately honor our dignity and meet you halfway, because you're not us. You don't have the range. We know, girl. That's really what we're asking for. And so this is why I get so angry when people talk about trans, as if trans women are this army bullying straight cisgender. I'm no, they're literally asking you to stop killing them and to honor their pronouns and maybe let them get health care. They're 2, 5 dozen or the other, It's we're trying to meet you. And so I want to say, in case you don't understand that queer people, Black people, trans people, we are trying, all right? We're not bullying you, and I wish that people who had this power, the Zuckerbergs, the Bezos, the whoever, would stop acting like y'all are being bullied when other people are saying, please give us a chance. Mm-hmm. I'm fed up.
That's really well put.
Somebody has to give this man a television show.
No, please don't. Super don't.
But she's right. One last question, and we'll end with you, Debbie, because Why Design Matters is the book. Oh, and by the way, the book, because of supply chain issues, was supposed to come out on 10/26 and then 11/9, and now it's coming out on 2/22/22. So please, if you can, pre-order the book, buy the book. It's a lovely, lovely, just
thank you,
representation of the podcast.
Somehow, through the power of the 92nd Street Y, they have 20 copies.
Yes, so there are copies here for your delectation. So who were some of your favorite interviewees over 16, almost 17 years of Design Matters?
Saeed Jones, Chanel Miller, Roxane Gay.
Nicely played.
Yeah.
We were is that why she brought us here to do the redo?
Yeah. Yeah.
No, she brought you here because you were so memorable.
Because I loved interviewing you. Chris Ware, Eve Ensler, who now goes by the name V, Chip Kidd, Emily Oberman, Brene Brown, Esther Perel. I mean, it's Sophie's choice to ask me that, because in that moment of interviewing them, they were my absolute favorites. And I do have to say that a lot of my favorites are in the book. And they're in the book not only because they're my favorites, but also because I was able to extract a piece of them that allowed them to sort of be timeless. They weren't about a specific book or a specific piece of music or a specific performance. They were really about who the person is. And so I would say, yeah, present company.
Well, thank you. That's
Thank you.
very
We love
kind
you.
of you. Why Design Matters is out on 2/22/22. And thank you, Chanel Miller and Saeed Jones, for joining us today. And thank you all for coming out.
Yeah, thanks for coming out. Thanks to everybody online.
Oh, yeah. Hi, Internet.
Mwah.
Yes, yes.
All right, ready?
Whoop.